security researchers created a fake crypto startup, posted job listings, and hired North Korean intelligence operators as developers. They gave them virtual desktops that were actually sandboxes recording everything. And what they captured, including the forged documents and the AI-generated IDs, gives us a rare inside look into how these North Korean inside operators actually run their operations. And that's just one of the nation-state campaigns we're covering today.
Welcome to Shadow Talk, a cybersecurity podcast powered by ReliaQuest, the leader in agentic AI security operations. I'm Tehman Tariq, Senior Manager of Gray Matter Operations.
And I'm John Dilgen, Threat Intelligence Analyst. Now, in today's episode, we're covering 3 different nation-state campaigns that have all had big developments within the last few weeks. Iran, Russia, and North Korea, each with a completely different approach to compromising Western organizations.
And by the end of this episode, you'll have a clear picture of 3 active campaigns. The first one is Iran's sustained targeting of internet-exposed PLCs inside critical infrastructure. The next one is Russia's zero-click Zimbra exploit that fires the moment you open an email. And the last one is North Korea's long-running effort to place operatives inside Western companies as software developers. For each, we'll break down how the attack works, why traditional defenses fall short, and the specific steps you can take to close the gaps. So let's start with Iran. John, walk us through what's happening with the PLCs.
Yeah, so recently on July 22nd, there was an updated joint advisory from the FBI and other agencies like CISA and the NSA. And they were urgently warning that Iranian-affiliated actors are actively targeting internet-connected programmable logic controllers, or PLCs, across U.S. critical infrastructure. And these devices are the ones that control physical industrial processes, so things like water treatment, power generation, and manufacturing. Now, the specific campaign has been active since at least March of 2026, and they've been hitting PLCs across government services, water and wastewater systems, and energy. The most recent July update warns that more PLC manufacturers have been affected beyond just the original devices that were targeted in March.
And attackers exploiting devices across multiple manufacturers sound more like a targeted and sustained campaign rather than just a surge around a new vulnerability.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tehman. This is definitely a consistent campaign. And for you listening, for your context, the group behind this is affiliated with the cyber element of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and they've been previously tracked as names like Cyber Avengers, Hydro Kitten, Storm 0784, as well as several other names. And back in November of 2023, they compromised at least 75 US-based PLCs and deployed custom malware to cause operational disruption and financial loss, which is the same goal they're still pushing for in this current campaign. Now, the malicious code that they executed back in 2023, it's still observed on some devices to this day, which really shows the effectiveness of the code and the challenge that many organizations have properly remediating it.
And that's a great point, John. Underlining one of the key differences of nation-state actors, resiliency. In this current campaign, how are they actually getting in?
Yeah, and so in this case, it's surprisingly straightforward, right? They're using leased infrastructure from commercial hosting providers, which is a common technique, and that's essentially where they rent servers and use them to mask their origin and maintain operational cover. They combine that with the manufacturer's own programming software to remotely connect to PCLs, or I should say PLCs, that are sitting on the internet with insufficient security controls. Now, in this campaign, they're targeting ports specifically 44818, 2222, 102, and 502, as well as hitting modems on port 22. Once they're inside, they disable critical shutdown and alarm logic, allowing systems to enter unsafe operating conditions without the operator ever being notified that anything is wrong. And how they get there is also concerning. They download a malicious project file that retains the legitimate ladder logic for normal operations, but adds logic that overrides safety parameters. From there, they modify and delete project file logic, including add-on instructions, and manipulate HMI and SCADA displays to keep the operators in the dark.
So what we're seeing is that operators are looking at their screens thinking everything is normal because there is no alert, while the system is actually operating very unsafely.
Yeah, exactly. And another important factor behind this campaign is the recent escalation is likely in response to recent escalations in the hostilities between Iran, the United States, and Israel.
And then, John, let's also move on to Russia because this one's also very interesting to me.
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of funny how the timing matches up. So on July 23rd, which is literally the next day after the first advisory we just mentioned, we got another one. And this one was co-authored by 26 agencies across 16 different countries. This particular one covers Laundry Bear, who's a Russian state-supported group that's also tracked as Avoid Blizzard. Now, they've been targeting the Zebra collaboration suite and its users since at least July of 2025. Now, if you don't know, Zebra Collaboration Suite is an enterprise email and collaboration platform that's used by over 6,000 organizations across 127 countries. And this includes things like government agencies, universities, and businesses that use it as a cost-effective alternative to Microsoft Exchange. Now, Laundry Bear has been specifically targeting those organizations with a focus on government entities, defensive contractors, and critical infrastructure across Europe and North America. And what's really wild here is the specific exploit that they're using, which is CVE 2025-66376, which is a cross-site scripting vulnerability caused by improper sanitization of directives and email content. And the exploit runs entirely when the email is viewed. Now, that's really important. Users don't click on anything or open an attachment. They just view the email in the web client, and the JavaScript payload executes immediately.
This is something that's great to highlight, is that there's no user interaction at all beyond opening the email, which is really concerning. The top malware delivery methods, think ClickFix and SockGhoulish, they use JavaScript to encourage user interaction and then download malware. But here, the actors don't even need to do that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And behind that, the script they execute is automated. The moment it fires, it runs 12 parallel collection stages. It steals your last 90 days of email, your password, your organization's entire global address list, your 2FA codes, and it creates a new application passcode for persistence. Now, this campaign began in July 2025, as we mentioned, but the CVE itself wasn't published until January of 2026, with the patch coming out just before that in November of 2025 for the affected versions. But what this really means, and the important takeaway, is that the threat actors had months of exploitation before anyone knew the vulnerability existed.
Meaning they had a lot of time to steal data. So let's walk through what the exfiltration process actually looked like.
Yeah, and that's another important piece because in this case, the threat actors built a custom automated capability named Flowerbed, and it was specifically designed for defense evasion through multiple exfiltration channels. Data is pulled out simultaneously over both DNS and HTTPS, and every 60 seconds, an automated process transfers the collected data off to non-public infrastructure. Using the dual channels in this method means that blocking one path doesn't stop the exfiltration, and it also helps break up the data into smaller pieces, making it less notable or noticeable for defenders. Another important detail is that there are indications that AI played a role in developing the Flowerbed codebase itself. And this is a great example of adversaries upskilling themselves with AI, using it to build and iterate on capabilities faster than the traditional development would allow. Combined with their history of leveraging open source tools like EvilGenX, Laundry Bear here is demonstrating how AI is accelerating threat actor capabilities.
Now let's move the convo over to North Korea specifically, which is a long-running campaign that we've covered before, but recent research captured the full attack chain in action.
Yeah, this is another interesting one that's also been developing. So on August 10th, researchers released an investigation where they created a fake startup and actually hired suspected North Korean IT workers from the threat group known as Famous Kolima, which is a division under the Lazarus umbrella. Their objective wasn't to hack a company here, it was to become an employee of a company, which, as we mentioned, is this campaign we've covered in other episodes. Now, in this case, the security researchers set up a legitimate looking DeFi protocol with a real website, branding, and even a cryptocurrency collection and NFTs on OpenSea. Then they even hired 3 operatives through a recruiter found on GitHub, and the hires were smart contract, front end, and back end developers.
And the most interesting insights to me were in the identity verification process. John, can you explain that portion as well?
Yeah. And this is really why we highlighted this story, because a lot of the information that's come out helps paint a picture into how they operate and helps show organizations where they can strengthen their defenses. So this next piece is going to be a big piece when we get into the recommendations section. So definitely listen up, right? One impersonator provided a fake Texas driver's license with a valid SSN or social security number and a bank account. Another claimed a California license while claiming to live in Texas with a bank account in New York. And the researchers conducted metadata analysis on the image in their license and showed that it had been processed with Google Gemini and it contained a SynthID watermark, confirming it had been generated by AI. Now, the last one didn't even use a forged identity. He instead submitted a New York driver's license belonging to a real person, and the metadata analysis confirmed that it was an authentic iPhone 15 photo. So this data was likely taken from a KYC process, or a know your customer process, which is an identity verification system companies use to confirm who the users actually are. And when the data is exposed here, real identity documents become tools for impersonation.
And John, just so I'm understanding this clearly, they're using AI to forge documents and also are using stolen real identities.
Yeah, exactly. And that really just shows the level at which threat actors are bringing different supporting documents and forged documents in the hiring process. Now, once they were in, they were given virtual desktops, which were actually sandbox environments, recording everything that they were doing. And their attack patterns followed a similar playbook to what we've seen in other attacks. System reconnaissance, installing Google remote desktops. One of them even synced his personal Google account, exposing the entire browsing history, saved passwords, and extensions to researchers.
And let me explain that slightly differently. So, a North Korean intelligence operative hired under a fake identity to infiltrate a company accidentally gave the researchers access to his real Google account by syncing it to the work machine. That's an operational security failure at a remarkable level.
Yeah, it certainly is. And to me, it speaks to one of two things, right? Either the skill level of the actors was low, or they're operating at a scale which makes mistakes likely. And I think that latter point is what we've seen a lot in campaigns where they get a lot of these jobs across different organizations and operate at a large scale. Now, they've also seen that is the researchers also observed tactics very similar to other campaigns. And the tool set that they use include Astral VPN throughout their operations, ChatGPT for coding assistance, Google Gemini for document forgery, browser extensions like AI Apply, and Final Round AI for automating job applications.
Now, that's all the campaigns and their major details. Let's talk through what that means for defenders. So, 3 nation states, 3 completely different attack vectors. And together, they stretch security teams across fundamentally different domains simultaneously: industrial control systems, enterprise email, and the hiring process itself. John, what do organizations need to do to understand these attacks better?
Yeah, let's start with the Iranian example, right? The core challenge here is OT devices that are reachable from the internet, vulnerable to attack, and under-monitored. Now, some of this exposure is intentional, right? Organizations have business demands for remote monitoring, vendor maintenance access, and the ongoing convergence of IT and OT networks. They all create legitimate reasons for connectivity. But many of these exposures are unintentional through things like misconfigured firewalls, cloud integrations, or default device settings. And the harsh reality here is that if you have internet exposed PLCs in your environment, then you're structurally vulnerable to this campaign, and you need to ensure that those devices get secured as soon as possible. And really, this problem is only going to get harder. We've talked about, the evolution of frontier AI models and how first they're discovering vulnerabilities faster than defenders can remediate them. And now, in our most recent episode, discussing how these models can autonomously execute a full attack chain. So think about this. How long before that capability is pointed specifically at OT environments? In this case, the attack surface is large, the devices are often unmonitored, and the compromise or the consequence of compromise is critical. That's an increasingly attractive target profile.
And John, that's a great point, but also a very scary thought. So in contrast, the Zimbra campaign presents a defense challenge that sits well beyond the reach of user awareness training. So because execution is fully automated and it requires zero user interaction, the right defensive response is much later in the attack chain. So think monitoring DNS traffic for anomalous subdomain patterns, inspecting email content for exploitation chains, and alerting on unauthorized application passcode creation as well. So when an attack bypasses user interaction and awareness, your detections need to cover what follows. Combine that with an automated response and containment as well.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation. Now, the third challenge here is malicious operatives attempting to onboard through these software engineering roles. Now, these candidates are primarily interacting with HR staff and recruiters, and they're teams that are skilled at evaluating communication and culture fit, but they're rarely trained to identify things like identity forged documents, AI generated artifacts, or coordinated hiring patterns. Now, the threat here isn't so much a technical exploit, but really a process gap. And HR teams need to be equipped with clear, specific procedures, things like live video verification and an understanding of the behavioral indicators that correlate with this type of operation.
And what ties all three of these together is that each one demands defense hardening in a completely different part of your environment. For example, Iran requires deep visibility into your OT network traffic and your industrial protocols, whereas Russia requires email content inspection and DNS anomaly detections. And for the last one, North Korea, it requires identity verification controls and a trained HR staff. Most organizations aren't fully protected across all three of these domains, and that's precisely the gap that these campaigns are built to exploit.
Yeah, but the good news here is that the controls exist and defense is possible. But that's what we're going to walk through after we get back from the break.
Shadow Talk is brought to you by ReliaQuest, the global leader in AI cybersecurity. ReliaQuest helps enterprise cybersecurity teams contain threats in minutes with its agentic AI security operations platform, Grey Matter. ReliaQuest makes security possible for the most trusted enterprise brands in the world. Learn more at ReliaQuest.com.
And we're back. Let's talk defense, John. Let's go campaign by campaign.
Yeah, certainly. So starting again with that first one, the Iranian PCL campaign. Number one priority here is to remove every PCL, HMI, and SCADA system possible from direct internet access. Now, these actors rely entirely on remote connectivity to misconfigured devices. So if you cut that off, the attack chain really breaks here at the first step. So the big thing is conduct audit scanning on those ports we mentioned, 44818, 2222, 102, 502, really looking for any internet accessible OT assets. Place all remote OT access behind a secure gateway that requires MFA and session logging. Now, in the advisory, there are specific callouts for the different technologies targeted here. Just a quick summary of them. For Rockwell devices specifically, place physical mode switches into run position immediately. That prevents any remote modification. For Siemens devices, enable programming protection in the TIA portal. And for cellular modem connectivity, you can implement isolated architectures, things like private APNs or site-to-site VPNs.
And that covers reducing exposure for this specific campaign. But what about those future campaigns that target entirely different ports or utilize different types of attack vectors as well?
Yeah, that's an important question. And really, it points to a broader recommendation as we're getting higher level here, right? So, as we mentioned, many of these devices are unintentionally left exposed. So, organizations need regular automated scanning and discovery for internet facing OT assets, not just a one time audit triggered by an advisory, but continuous visibility into what's exposed. And that lets you respond before a threat actor can find the device.
Now, looking ahead, as attackers begin weaponizing AI to accelerate discovery and exploitation in OT environments, defenders are also going to need AI driven monitoring just to keep pace. Manual processes simply won't scale against automated adversary tooling across environments this large and this consequential. So, really, every organization should be asking, how can we implement AI to help defend our OT environments? Now, moving into the next topic. All right, John, what should organizations do for the Zimbra campaign specifically?
Yeah, so in this case, there's three immediate actions if you're running Zebra in your environment. First, you need to patch the latest versions if you haven't already. Those include 10.1.13 or 10.0 port 18. Now, second, you want to audit all application passcodes created since July 2025, specifically looking for anything named Zimbra Web. Now, because this CVE was being actively exploited months before public disclosure, you need to treat any environment that went unpatched as potentially compromised and investigate accordingly.
And most of our listeners are probably running Outlook, not Zimbra, and maybe thinking that this one doesn't apply to them.
Yeah, and that's really understandable, but it misses the broader point, right? There's a higher level recommendation here, just like in the PCL campaigns, right? And the important thing is that threat actors have identified and exploited similar zero-click vulnerabilities in Outlook. So this next takeaway isn't platform specific, right? It's that zero-click email exploits are an established technique, and your defensive posture needs to account for them regardless of the mail platform you're using. So concretely, you want to monitor for DNS traffic, looking for anomalous subdomain patterns, things like carrying base 32 encoded data, alert on unexpected application passcodes, device pairing, or OAuth token creation, which are common persistent mechanisms. If you build those now before the next CVE drops and layer in automated response with them, you're in a better position to defend.
And now moving on to our last topic, specifically around the insider campaign for the famous Colima. You have any good recommendations there, John?
Yeah, so we laid out some of that hiring process structure in the HR before, but this one here is post-hire. All right, so your security team has some specific technical indicators that they can hunt for to see if an operative has been onboarded. Astral VPN is a consistently used tactic by these North Korean operatives to maintain operational cover. Likewise, they also use IP KVM devices, which is really just hardware that allows for remote keyboard and mouse control while appearing to work locally. Now, these are documented parts of their toolkit, so you can hunt on them. And if you're seeing Astral VPN connections or unexplained KVM devices in your environment, then these are a good starting point to begin investigations on those users.
Now let's bring this home. So if you're a CISO or a security leader listening, there's two areas that require your immediate attention. The first one is your HR onboarding security. So your hiring process is an active attack surface. Do you have an identity verification procedure that's been documented, enforced, and is being regularly tested? That means things such as a live video check, looking for image metadata reviews for deepfakes, and also recruiter training on DPRK specific red flags, or as many of them as possible. The second one is OT exposure. Ask your OT team whether any PLCs, HMIs, or SCADA systems are currently accessible from the internet. If your team can't answer that question with confidence, you need regular asset discovery setup, which is a great use case for automation. Now, for tomorrow morning's action item, pull up your employee onboarding policy and your red team exercise history. Does your onboarding process include live identity verification? Do your exercises include a malicious job applicant scenario? If the answer to either is no, Those are your first 2 action items.
Yeah, those are some great recommendations here. And now for the operators, right? This first one goes directly to what Tehman was mentioning. If your CISO is asking you that question, or if you want to get prepared for that conversation, you need to first audit your OT devices for what's exposed out on the internet. Start with those ports we mentioned, 44818, 2222, 102, and 502. Those are the ones being actively targeted by the Iranian APT. Ensure any exposed devices are quickly placed behind security controls using MFA and additional logging. Second, hunt for North Korean insider indicators. You can scan for Astral VPN usage, unexplained IP KVM devices in your environment. Those are good starting points to identify these potential users. Your tomorrow morning action here is going to be to pull your DNS logs from the last 30 days and query for subdomains with unusual entropy or things like base32 encoded patterns. Now that's the exfiltration channel that was used in the flowerbed tool sets. And then from there, you should ensure that you have alerting for the persistence mechanisms we mentioned, like application passcodes, device pairing, or OAuth token creation events. Nation states aren't waiting for permission. They're exploiting your PCLs, reading your email the moment you view it, and applying for jobs at your company. The defenses here are different, but the urgency is the same. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Shadow Talk. If you'd like to get in touch, as a reminder, we just added that feedback survey in the link tree below. It only takes a couple minutes, so please let us know how we can improve. And we're always available at shadowtalk@reliaquest.com as well. We'll be back next week with another episode of Shadow Talk.